to go ahead and review really quickly multiplying of fractions, and we worked this earlier. So when we multiply fractions, we need to remember that we do not need a common denominator. Multiplying is the most basic form of working in fractions, and that's where we can multiply straight across. The only step that might save you some time in the end would be to go through and what they call cross cancel. So if you can cross cancel, it just helps you so that you don't have to reduce your answer later. So when I talk about cross canceling, this is what I'm saying. When I look at 1/3 times 3/7, I'm comparing this top number to my bottom numbers, and I notice that I have 3 in both the top and the bottom. So that means that 3 would go into each of these. So 3 would go into 3 once, and 3 would go into 3 once. And now if I multiply straight across, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7, so I get 1/7. Had I not done the cross canceling, we would have had 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. And then we would have had to realize from that point that, 3 would go into both 3 and 21, which would then take us back to this 1 and 1/7. So cross canceling is something that will help you in not having to reduce larger numbers. So it's something, if you're comfortable with, to go ahead and try it out and see if you can get more comfortable with it. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're actually going to be working fractions, and we're going to be using rational numbers, so they're not always going to be positive. So we're going to review really quick when we multiply and divide integers from last chapter, what we would do. So let's say I had -4 times 5. When I would multiply those out, I would take 4 times 5 to get my number part of my answer, which is 20. And then multiplying and dividing is when we would get to go through and count the number of negative signs. So here there's only one negative sign between the two digits, which means that's an odd number. It makes my answer a -20. So this is when we worked with integers. We're going to use that same concept, only we're going to combine multiplying fractions and counting our negatives to decide if our answer is positive or negative. Okay, so let's try one of these out. So here I have -4/9 times -3/5. So I'm going to go through and look at this really quick in terms of, I know I'm multiplying, so I have 2 negative signs. I know in the end my answer is going to be a positive answer. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. I already know it's going to be positive. Now, as I look at 4/9 and 3/5, if you don't like the negative signs in there, you can go ahead and rewrite it without those now, because we're really only using those negative signs to decide if our answer is positive or negative. Okay, this is what I'm noticing. As I look at these fractions here, I am noticing 3 and 9 both have 3, that they're divisible by 3. So I could cross cancel. 3 divided by 3 would give me 1. 9 divided by 3 would give me 3. Now if I multiply straight across, 4 times 1 is 4, over 3 times 5 is 15. That's my answer lowest term. So my final answer would actually be a positive 4/15. Okay, if you hadn't cross canceled, you would have had 12 over 45. And then you would have had to be able to look at that and say, I wonder what number would go into both of those. And I know those are 2 digits where it's really, really hard to see, versus if you could just learn to compare some of these smaller ones, like 3 and 9, you would see that actually each of these could have been divided by 3 over 3. It's just easier to see when they're in these smaller numbers like this. Okay, so it's something to try. It will help you in not maybe having to reduce some numbers that are quite so large. Okay, so let's try another one. So here we have -2/7 times 3/4. So my first step is to always, let's look to see if our answer is going to be positive or negative. And we have 1 negative sign there, so I know my answer is going to be a negative answer. Now on this one, is there anywhere that we could cross cancel? Let's see, would 2 work into 7 or 4? Yep, 2 would go into 4 an even number of times. So 2 would go into itself once and into 4 twice. Okay, so that's doing that cross canceling. 3 won't go into 7 or 2. So now I'm going to multiply straight across. 1 times 3 is 3, over 7 times 2 is 14. So I end up with -3/14. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put another one up here. I'll go ahead and write it out so that you can practice. Okay, so this is gonna be your independent work. So I want you to go through and let's do -5/7 times -3/10. Now the reason I'm putting that second one in a parenthesis is just so that you realize that it's not times a minus, it's times a negative. So now you're gonna go through, work your way through this problem, so you can pause your video, work your way through, and then check back in just a second to see what your final answer is. So you should have gotten +3/14 when it was reduced down. Okay, so that's working with just regular fractions. Now we're gonna move in and review really quick, working with mixed numbers. So when you have a mixed number and you multiply, you can't actually multiply or divide mixed numbers. You have to change them to improper fractions. So the process that you have to use is you have to multiply. Let me change my color here. Multiply your whole number times your base number, or your denominator. So 4 times 2 is gonna give me 8. And then I'm gonna add my top number of 3. So 8 plus 3 is 11. So I'm now gonna look at this as -11, still over 4. Okay, and we're gonna take that times, we're gonna do the same thing. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 would give me 4 over 3. So now we're back down to what we were just working with. We now have fractions instead of mixed numbers. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a very easy cross-canceling because we have a 4 on the top and a 4 on the bottom. So those would each become 1s. So now when we multiply straight across, 11 times 1 is 11. 1 times 3 is 3. And our answer, well, we only have one negative, so it's a negative. So I get a -11/3. To change that to a mixed number, we have to think like this. 11 divided by 3. And a lot of you can do that in your head. Okay, and if you're not comfortable with that, it's something you might have to go through and actually write it out. So let's see. 3 would go into 11 3 times. So, which is going to put me at 9. I have 2 left over for my remainder. So it would be 2 over what I originally had on the bottom, which is a 3. And I can't forget to put my negative sign in there. So your final answer is either a -11/3, or as a mixed number, that would be -3 2/3. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, so your first step is to change these into improper fractions. So here I've got a whole number. Well, anytime we have a whole number, it can always be written as a fraction by writing it over 1. Okay, so there's my first fraction, is it's going to be -9 over 1. Okay, to change 8 and 5, 6, we're going to multiply. So 6 times 8 is 48, plus 5. So 48 plus 5 is going to give me 53 over 6, and we're multiplying these. Okay, so looking at this, I can tell you right now that my answer is going to be negative because I only have one negative. And now I'm going to go through and see, could I cross cancel? Well, let's see. My smaller numbers are on the bottom. So 6 won't go into 9, but is there a number that would go into both 9 and 6? 3. 3 would go into both of those. So let's see, 9 divided by 3 would give me a 3 now. And 6 divided by 3 would give me 2. Okay, so now instead of looking at those as 9 and 6, we're going to look at them as 3 and 2. So now we're going to multiply straight across. So 3 times 53, well, 3 times 50 is 150. And then 3 times 3 is 9. So 159 over 1 times 2 is 2. So improper, it would be 159 over 2. As a mixed number, that one's kind of hard to do in my head, but I could do some kind of mental calculation. If I were to do, that's really close to 160. If I did 160 divided by 2, it would give me 80, and it's not quite that. So if you need to, you could go through and use mental calculation, or you can just divide out like you normally would. So 2 would go into 15 7 times, which puts me at 14. 2 would go into 19 9 times, which is 18. I have a remainder of 1, so that's my new top number over bottom. So this is the same as negative 7 and 1/2. Not 7, 79 and 1/2. Okay, and we are going to work more with those mixed numbers and converting them, just to get you guys in the practice of doing them. At this point, if I can get you to just being able to work with identifying is it positive or negative and getting the improper fraction, I'll take that. We're going to work more throughout the year on the mixed numbers. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and give you one to do on your own. So I want you to try this one. Negative 3 and 1/2 times 4 and 7/10. Okay, so go ahead and try that one out. You can pause your video, work your way through it, and then restart your video in just a minute. Okay, so when you go through to work this one out, let's go ahead and do these. I've got a negative, and then we've got 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 would be 7 over 2, times 10 times 4 is 40, plus 7 is 47 over 10. Okay, so now I don't see any cross canceling, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply these out. So if you want to use your calculator to help with that multiplication, you can do that. But I'll go ahead and do this longhand. So 47 times 7, 49, and 28 plus 4 would give me 32. So I get 329 over 20, and that would be a negative answer. And then if you wanted to change that to a mixed number, let's see, 20 would go into 105 times. So 200 would be 10, 300 would be 15, and then to 20 would be a 16, puts me at 320. I have 9 left over, 20. So as a mixed number, that would be negative 16 and 9/20. Okay, so we also have where we're gonna go ahead and work through working exponents with fractions. Okay, so we're going to review what we did back in chapter 1 when we did integers. So when we had that negative sign included in the parenthesis, we could use our exponent to help us decide if it was going to be positive or negative. Because really this written out would look like this, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And you'll notice that we had 1, 2, 3 negatives. So when it's included in there, then we get to use the exponent to say, okay, there's 3 negatives, that's an odd number, our answer is going to be a negative answer. And then we would just solve 2 to the 3rd power, which is 8. So here we would get negative 8. Some of you may need to go to this point of just writing it out. Okay, so here, this one would be the same as negative 2 times negative 2, because we're including that negative with the 2 when we write it out. Okay, and we did 2 of those, so even number of negatives is a positive answer. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so then we also worked where we had the negative on the outside. So that's when we would go through and just bring our negative straight down. And then we would solve, what is 3 squared? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. So my final answer here would be negative 9. Okay, so we're going to extend on that learning. And we're going to work a little bit with fractions that involve exponents. And I promise I'll break it down very basic so that it's a little bit, I don't know why that blue dot's in there, but we'll just move it. Okay, so here I have 1/3 squared, and I'm going to put this in a parenthesis. So we'll put that parenthesis around the 1/3. So I know that that seems really confusing. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to do that. There are 2 ways to look at this. Before, when we had like 2 squared, you could think of it as 2 times 2. Right? Well, if you want to, then you could really take this, what's inside of our parentheses, and you could just do it twice. So we've got 1/3 times 1/3. So that's one way to look at it. The other way you could look at it is you could kind of break it down if you don't like the whole fraction thing really frustrates me. Okay, so you could actually write it out like this. This 2 is going to apply to both the top and the bottom. So I could really write this out like this, 1 squared over 3 squared. Now this is the method I prefer just because it's less writing and it's also something very easy for me to do because when I was younger, fractions always frustrated me. So when I go through and I do this, 1 times 1 or 1 squared is 1, 3 squared is 9. So we get 1/9. See how I would get the same thing here? It's all in how you prefer to look at it, okay? If you don't like the whole fact that there's a fraction there, don't let the fraction be what slows you down. Think of them as 2 integers, one on top of the other. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's do 2/3 to the 3rd power. So this is how I like to look at it. I like to look at it like this. 2 to the 3rd power over 3 to the 3rd power. So that 3 is applying to both the top and the bottom numbers. So now I just like to think of it as 2 to the 3rd power. 2 times 2 times 2 is going to give me 8. And 3 to the 3rd power, 3 times 3 times 3 is going to give me 27. I'm done. So 8 27ths. Or you could write it out as 2/3 times 2/3 times 2/3 if you like to see all of those individually. What do you suppose is going to happen when we have a negative in there? Okay, we're going to jump back to what we just reviewed. And we're going to say, that exponent, since it's included in there, is going to tell me how many negatives there are. Okay, there's 2 negatives there, which means my answer is going to be a positive answer. Okay, so I know that. Now I'm going to think of it like this. 1 squared over 4 squared. So 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 4 is 16. My final answer here is a positive 1/16. Oops, wrong thing. Okay, so let's try another one. Oops. Okay, so we have negative 3/4 squared. So our exponent's going to tell us how many negative signs there are. 2. So that's a positive answer. And now we're going to think of it like this. 3 squared over 4 squared. So 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9. 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. We just found out that our answer to negative 3/4 squared is 9/16. Positive. Okay, so I want you guys to try this next one. Okay, try this one out. So you have negative 2/5 to the 3rd power. So your exponent, your negative's included in there, your exponent is telling you how many negative signs are there. So go ahead, pause your video, work your way through this one, and then check back to see what your answer is. So you should have gotten negative 8/25. And sorry, I put my negative right in front of my 8. I should have just put it in front of my whole fraction. So negative 8 over 125. Okay, so the next part is working with fractions and division. So we're going to review really quick what our rules are for dividing. Well, when we divide, remember that visual cue is we have 3 parts that make up that division sign. So we're going to keep, we're going to change, and we're going to flip. So there's that 3-word saying. So I keep the first one, I change to multiplying, and then I flip the last one, so 5 over 4. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow the same rules that I did for multiplying. I'm going to see if I can cross cancel. I don't see anything because 5 won't go into 4 and 4 evenly, and 1 goes into everything. Now I'm going to multiply straight across. So 5 over 16. Now, what they're going to do to us now, because we've been practicing fractions, is they might make one or both of these negative. So like here, had I had maybe a negative 1/4 times 5/4, divided by 4/5, it would make my answer a negative because we only had one negative sign. So remember with division, you gotta count how many negative signs are there. Okay, so let's try a couple of these. Okay, so here I have negative 1/2 divided by negative 5/10. Now, some of you might say, can I reduce 5/10? If you would like to do that, you may reduce it, but some kids aren't gonna see it, so it might stay that way. Okay, the one thing that I will tell you is you cannot cross cancel. You can reduce within a fraction, but you cannot cross cancel until after you've done the keep, change, flip. Okay, so I'm gonna keep negative 1/2. I'm gonna change to multiplying, and I'm gonna flip this. So it becomes 10 over 5. I was doing some mental calculations there. Okay, so now when I look at this, I'm noticing between these, if I didn't notice, I could have reduced that 5/10. I've got 2 that would go into both of those. So 2 would become a 1, and my 2 would go into 10 5 times. And that's it. So now if I multiply straight across, 1 times 5 is going to give me 5 over 1 times 5 is 5, which changes into 1, right? Now I'm going to count my negative signs. Looks like I only have one negative sign, so that makes this a -1 for a final answer. Okay, that one was kind of tricky. Had I changed it into 1/2, if I were to ask you what's 1/2 divided by 1/2, most of you would say, oh, that's 1. Okay, so let's go through and do another one. Okay, so we have negative 1/2 divided by 3/5. Okay, so this one I want you to try on your own. You're gonna keep, you're gonna change, and you're gonna flip. And this first one here, this is a negative 1/2. I know that they kind of blend, it blends together, but that's negative 1/2. So go ahead and do your process, and then check back in just a minute to see what your final answer should have been. You should have gotten -5/6 for that one. Okay, so now we're gonna extend this into mixed numbers. So we're gonna follow the same process as when we multiplied. We're gonna have to change our mixed numbers to improper fractions first. So let's review that process again. Bottom times whole number, which would be 8, plus 1 would give us 9 over 2. Okay, we're gonna change this to multiplying. And then originally this fraction would be 10 plus 2 would be 12 over 5. So I'm going to flip that to 5 over 12. Okay. Now, some of you might be comfortable with seeing that there's a 3 that would go into both of these, and some may not. I can see the 3. I know that 3 will go into 9 3 times, and 3 will go into 12 4 times. And then let's see, 3 won't go into 2, 5 won't go into 2 or 5, so I'm done. So now I'm going to multiply straight across. 3 times 5 is 15, over 2 times 4 is 8. And we didn't have any negatives there. So now if we go through, that could also be 1 and 7/8. Okay, had they put negatives, then we would count our negatives to see if it's going to be a positive or a negative answer. Okay, so let's try another one. So here we have 2 negatives. We should be able to identify right away that our answer is going to be positive in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and put that over there so that as I'm writing these fractions out, I don't have to bring the negatives down because now I've already decided it's going to be a positive answer. So we're going to change this. So 6 plus 2 is 8 over 3. And then this would originally be 10 plus 3 would be 13 over 5. So I'm going to keep, I'm going to change to multiplying, and I'm going to flip this one. So 5 over 13. So looking at those, I don't see anywhere I can cross cancel because 8 won't go into 3 or 13. 5 and 3 and 13 do not have a common factor, so now we're just going to multiply straight across. 8 times 5 is 40 over 3 times 13 is 39. as a mixed number, that would be 1 and 1 over 39. Okay, so I'm gonna slide one out here and have you guys work on that because it's not a new skill. It's actually just combining stuff that we've already worked on. So I want you to try this one. So you have 4 2/5 divided by -3 7/10. You can pause your video and then check back in just a minute to see if you got your answer correct. Okay, so you should have gotten -44 37ths, or if you changed it to a mixed number, -1 7 37ths. So these are tough, but I think if you just break down into the parts that you've already learned, just keep remembering math is constantly building on itself. Good luck with these, you guys.